This video will provide an introduction to the process of aerobic respiration. As a part of this video, we'll discuss the importance of metabolism by looking at its relationship with human disease. We'll also talk about the carbon cycle, and finally we'll provide an overview of the process of aerobic respiration. By the end of this video, you should be able to describe the importance of metabolic pathways to human health and disease. You should be able to state the role of electron transfer in aerobic respiration. And finally, you should be able to name and describe the 3 stages that make up aerobic respiration. So let's begin by talking about the importance of metabolism to human health. We know that metabolic pathways are very important to human health because inborn errors in specific genes that encode enzymes that play a role in metabolic pathways lead to devastating diseases. In fact, this is why babies, when they're born, are immediately tested for several different inborn errors of metabolism, because frequently these can be controlled with diet. So here we see one example, phenylketonuria. This is a disease in which the patients are deficient in the enzyme phenylalanine hydroxylase. So because they're lacking this enzyme, they can't convert phenylalanine to tyrosine, which leads to a backup in the amount of phenylalanine, which is shunted off to be converted into phenylpyruvate or phenylketone. Now, this phenylpyruvate then builds up in the nervous tissues of these children and leads to progressive loss of mental capacity. So because of the prevalence of this disease, you'll notice that all NutraSweet containing beverages and foods such as this Diet Coke all have a warning that says phenylketonurics contains phenylalanine. And as you can imagine, phenylalanine is present in many proteins, so these patients also really have to restrict their protein intake. Similarly, maple syrup urine disease, which is named for exactly why it sounds, patients who have this disease have build up a metabolite in their urine that makes their urine look and smell like maple syrup. So they have to eat products that are lacking leucine, isoleucine, and valine because they can't break down these amino acids. In the case of galactosemia, this is a disorder in which enzymes that are involved in the breakdown of galactose these enzymes are either mutated or absent. And in this case, once again, a metabolic byproduct that accumulates, which can lead to brain damage, cataracts, jaundice, and problems with the liver and kidneys. So these babies also have to be maintained on a very restrictive diet. So these diseases show the importance of metabolic pathways and how small changes in single enzymes in these pathways can lead to devastating consequences. So to understand the role of aerobic respiration, we first need to put it in context of the carbon cycle. So within an ecosystem, as a part of the process of photosynthesis, carbon dioxide and water are taken in by plants, and then with the help of light energy, this is converted to organic molecules such as glucose, which then in the presence of oxygen can be converted by cellular respiration to form ATP. And as you know, ATP is the energy currency of the cell, which is used to power almost all cellular processes. And this takes place in the mitochondria, and as a byproduct of these processes, this produces carbon dioxide and water. So this basically creates a cycle in which carbon dioxide and water are used by plants, which give off organic molecules and oxygen, which is then taken in through the process of cellular respiration to produce ATP, and then gives off carbon dioxide and water. So this creates a cycle in which indirectly energy from the sun is used to power cellular work. So aerobic respiration, or the bottom half of that process, is actually a redox process. So as you may know from chemistry, a redox reaction is a reaction in which electrons are transferred. Something is reduced or gains electrons, and something else is oxidized or loses electrons. So this shows the overall equation for aerobic respiration. So you can see a molecule of glucose, C6H12O6, plus 6 molecules of oxygen, plus 32 molecules of ADP, plus 32 molecules of inorganic phosphate, yields 6 molecules of water, plus 6 molecules of CO2, plus 32 molecules of ATP. And here, this redox reaction is redox because here you can see that oxygen is what is reduced. It gains electrons to form water, whereas glucose is oxidized and loses electrons to form CO2. So the process of aerobic respiration occurs in several stages. In the first stage of glycolysis, glucose is converted through a series of reactions to the 3-carbon molecule pyruvate. So we begin with one 6-carbon molecule of glucose and end with 2 3-carbon molecules of pyruvate. This creates a little bit of ATP and a little bit of NADH, which will then feed into oxidative phosphorylation. The pyruvate is oxidized to form acetyl-CoA, which enters the citric acid cycle. The citric acid cycle is also known as the TCA cycle or the Krebs cycle. And this process does produce some ATP, but it also produces a great deal of NADH and FADH2, which then feeds into oxidative phosphorylation. Now, in both of these cases, NADH and FADH2 serve as carriers of high-energy electrons, and these high-energy electrons are fed into oxidative phosphorylation. These electrons are passed through a series of transport proteins, and they release some of their energy to form a proton gradient. This proton gradient is then used to drive ATP production. So the majority of ATP production occurs through the process of oxidative phosphorylation. So you'll notice that these processes take place at different parts of the mitochondria. So glycolysis actually takes place outside of the mitochondria, while oxidative phosphorylation and the citric acid cycle take place within the mitochondria. So within the interior of the mitochondria in the matrix, this is where pyruvate oxidation and the citric acid cycle take place, whereas oxidative phosphorylation takes place across the inner mitochondrial membrane. This is where the proton gradient is created that produces ATP. So the last 2/3 of aerobic respiration are taking place within the mitochondria. And that's the end of this video.